That leaves no listener behind.
Working class heroes, this is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Want to get your thoughts about the top stories of the week. Going to start right off with that. I want to hear it. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Yes, another week, another tragedy. I shouldn't say another week. These tragedies have been speeding up. What have we had? I saw a thing. What is this? The 16th shooting in 10 days. I mean, we're accelerating. I guess you can go, hey, but Rick, we're past the pandemic. I guess is that the message? Is that the message here? This is the 27th school shooting this year in the country. We're going to exceed the record easily this year. And you look at the numbers. This is an American thing. We are exceptional here. NPR came out with a story today that I came across. There's a study out there that looked at 29 countries, kind of like the U.S., the advanced economic countries, and we. Again, we're number one. We accounted for almost 97% of the firearm deaths among children 4 and younger. 92% of the firearm deaths in the age brackets of 5 to 14. So, yeah, I guess we're okay with that. And it's because, well, we've got so many guns. Again, we're number one at that too. We love to put up our finger and say we're number one. Here come a couple of things we are number one at. Now, Ted Cruz, he thinks we're exceptional for a whole bunch of other reasons. But I mean, we'll get to that. But I want your thoughts today, because this is one of those days where I'm hoping that this isn't going to be another one of those moments where you have another horrible tragedy, and we've had way too many of them. You have this media feeding frenzy where it's all we're talking about, and it's all we're being focused on, and every angle of it's being dissected, and every angle of it's being blamed, and then we have thoughts and prayers. Lots of thoughts and prayers, and we've had that already. Thoughts and prayers are out there. Then there's the blame. We're going through that right now, pointing fingers everywhere except where it belongs. And then we have the politicians going, hey, we got to do something. We have the debate on what should we do? We got to do something. And the people say, no, we can't do anything. And then we do nothing because nothing ever gets done. And then it kind of dies down. We forget about it until the next time. And this wheel just keeps spinning around and round. In fact, 119 times since 2018, there have been 119 mass shootings at schools. And you go, when do we stop? Well, I guess we don't. And as I said, this is now evidently guns are now the leading cause of death among young people in the U.S. Used to be car crashes. Now it's guns. We've made cars much safer and guns much more available. In fact, I would argue, and I've argued this before, that the NRA, they would put gun vending machines in schools if they could get away with it, but not. But here's the thing that's infuriating. Again, you've got these folks who, sorry, can't do anything. Sorry, there's nothing we can do. Sorry, there's nothing that can be done. The amendment. And all we keep hearing is the same tired frames. And what's frustrating to me is you look at the stories that came out. I mean, there are a lot of stories coming out of Uvalde, Texas right now. I guess they've changed their story. I've lost track. A dozen plus times at this point. Every time we turn around, there's a new story, a new timeline, a new something. We find that the police waited outside waited for 40 minutes, upwards of an hour, I'm told. Or so the reports, and while 19 children are being murdered and 2 teachers. And we keep hearing this frame. Good guy with a gun. We keep hearing this frame. What we need are, arm our teachers. Newt Gingrich came out with this. Newt came out and said, well, what we need to do, and this isn't new. This is, again, these are retread ideas from the last 119 shootings. What we need to do is we need to pay $500 a month to a teacher, arm them, give them the guns, because there's going to be a hero, good guy with a gun in every classroom. Now remember, these are the same people who just days before were saying we can't trust teachers because they're groomers and pedophiles. They can't be trusted to pick out a library book, but we now can trust them to pack heat in the classroom. We're gonna let them go heavy into the classroom, but sorry, the reading list. You can't be trusted with the reading list. We're gonna give you a Glock. But sorry, the reading list, bit too dangerous, bit too deadly. But what this tells us is I think they've got Hollywood on the brain. As much as the right hates Hollywood, I think they've got Hollywood on the brain. And I've been thinking about this. They've got this hero complex. And what we've seen in all of these shootings is the people that are supposed to be our saviors, the police, generally are waiting outside. They're waiting for tactical units to come in and do. There's nobody rushing through the door. There are no Rambos. There are no John McClanes. We hear this hero frame, and man, we throw that word around way too much. Look, the vast majority of police officers are courageous people who are doing their job in difficult jobs. They're not heroes. I mean, we throw that around way too much. They're people doing a difficult job, and they're doing risk assessment. All of those people looked at this situation and go, there's somebody in there with a weapon much more powerful than the little 6-shooter that I've got, a weapon that's meant to murder, a weapon that's meant for war, and the risk assessment is I'm not walking through the door. And not to mention, and this is, again, the other part of this, that murderer with the AR-15, he used the safety protocols against the police. We have these procedures that he was trained as a child to lock down to protect the students from the shooters, only he used it against the police. And you go, well, couldn't have seen that coming. But this frame that, we're going to have the good guy with the gun, the hero is going to race in and save the day. The teacher is going to take the little, the pistol and take on somebody with a weapon of war and body armor, which anybody who's trained in this stuff will tell you. And I've asked people who have seen combat, is this possible? No. People with actual training, career police officers, can't and don't do this stuff. There's a reason not every person who's been in the military or seen combat, there's no reason not everyone gets a Congressional Medal of Honor. Heroes are rare. I know, we love to throw that word around, but they're rare. And like I said, look at all of these shootings. The police were there. And look, I'm not blaming them for not rushing in head first into a blaze of AR-15 fire. Police response was not good, was bad. Decisions were horribly made. And we find out, and this is the other part of this. We find out that the police chief who waited had active shooter training. And recently, so this is one of those things, well, bad decisions were made. No, you made decisions in the moment based on your safety. No one was running through that door. So this was mitigating risk for the policemen there as well. It should have never gotten to this. And we don't talk about that. And this isn't only this situation. I mean, we can go back to the shooting in Florida a couple of years ago, where there were policemen there too. And look, I'm not beating up on cops. It is a tough job. It is a dangerous job. I don't know many people who are going to go rushing headfirst into a blaze of gunfire with a death wish. I don't know many of those people. And if that's the job description, I don't know many people who are going to sign up for it. And we shouldn't want that. We should be pushing for good policy. We don't need heroes. We need good policy. This isn't a right-left issue. To me, this shouldn't even be political. This isn't even a guns, no guns issue. This is a sanity issue. You know, back when we had the assault weapons ban, that little brief window of time, once we let that expire, the number of mass shooting deaths actually tripled. And you go, well, what more do we need? No, that's proof right there. No, see, causation doesn't necessarily, all that nonsense. Yeah, facts matter. And we have 400 million guns. Are we safer? There are guns. We are awash in guns. Are we any safer as a society? And I know, but Rick, the reason the schools are soft targets, it's a no gun zone. If we just armed the teachers. The only positive I see coming out of arming the teachers is maybe parents are a little more cordial. Maybe some of these radical, mouthy parents are going to be a little nicer. I don't see it stopping somebody walking in going to do horrible things. I do see more people throwing shots around as a potential for other students, more students to be killed, and also police taking out other people. No good scenario here. And what's interesting to me is we're still not talking about what the real issue is. The real issue being, the gun. And I know it's not the gun. It's not the gun's innocent here, completely innocent. And if you believe Ted Cruz, it's not even the gun, it's not even the people, it's the doors. Because Ted Cruz believes it's the door. We have a door problem. Yet the shooter was standing outside the door for over 12 minutes, from what I understand, shooting. That a problem too. We need sanity. We need to solve this problem, but we can't. And here's why we can't. Because the emails I've gotten from people who are going, but Rick, you can't stop bad people from doing bad things. It's true. You can't stop every scenario. You can't stop every bad thing from happening to everybody. It's true. I'll be the first to admit it. But you can mitigate some of it. You can limit the severity. You can try and be proactive. This idea that since we can't solve all of the problems, we don't solve any of them is ridiculous to me. In talking with people who are in law enforcement, when you ask the question, would you prefer going up against somebody with an AR-15 or somebody with a 9mm? Overwhelmingly, they go the 9mm. I may get hit with the 9mm. My vest will stop that 9mm shot. The 9mm may go through. It'll cause damage, but it's probably not going to kill me. You get hit with a round out of an AR-15. It's ripping through you. And you go, so what's the solution forward? Well, a lot of people are saying that what we need are universal background checks. We don't have them. And I have people go, but Rick, we do have background checks. And you go, it's true. We do have, performative kind of exercises that we do that if you're going to buy a gun from a gun store, there are some background checks. It is kind of difficult. Some states are a little more difficult than others. But I have a friend who, he has told me that he has never filled out one of the ATF's Form 4473. That's the form to buy a gun. Because once you give that information to the government, there's a permanent record, he believes. And maybe there is. Now, evidently, we're not allowed to have any kind of gun registration because that would be unconstitutional because we can't register guns. But we can register cars and we can register everything else, but not guns. And he claims that he's bought his arsenal from garage sales, gun shows, friends, family, random people on the internet. That's how that's done. So when you say, but we've already got background checks. No, we don't have universal background checks. In fact, when I bought my shotgun, bought it from a guy in a parking lot. And it's perfectly legal to do in the state of Pennsylvania. No fingerprints, no background check, no accountability. And that, for him, is this idea that, the government's coming and we're going to take on the government. This is his mindset. And this is where responsible, law-abiding gun owners should be demanding sane regulation. Because like my friend who's a crackpot, I'll be honest, people against sane, rational, thoughtful regulation, which is in the whole amendment thing, well-regulated militia. People against it, these conspiracy crackpots who think that they're going to water the tree of liberty with the blood of tyrants, forgetting the rest of the sentence, and patriots, because they do that. They read half the sentence. They think they're going to take down the government. But yet don't seem to have a problem registering other things, yet they love to use the analogy. They love to use the analogy of, cars kill people. And now we find out, as I said earlier, that guns are killing more young people than cars. But you don't seem to mind getting a license to drive a car. You don't seem to mind being tested that you're proficient to drive a car, that your car is inspected, that it works properly, that you get insurance. There doesn't seem to be a lot of pushback to that stuff. Yet, having a deadly weapon, in a lot of states, you don't even need to know how to load the damn thing, and you can carry it around. I feel unsafe with people like that. Because I know a lot of people I look at and go, I'm sorry, I don't think you should be carrying a gun. Because you don't know where the safety is. So I think there should be some component of training, of proficiency, of insurance, of ultimately accountability. But that's not where we are as a country because we've got the NRA, the No Responsibility Association. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Too radical? Or are we just going to continue to put up with, the cost of freedom, bunch of dead kids every once in a while? Is that the cost of freedom? Is that what the founding fathers would have signed on for? Is that what they wrote the Second Amendment for? Or was it, hey, we want to make sure that we keep tyrannical government and other countries from invading? Love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1943. That was the day 50,000 striking rubber workers ended their 5-day walkout in Akron, Ohio. It was World War II, and the no-strike pledge was in full effect. Bosses were awash in defense contract profits. At the same time, they used the no-strike pledge to violate collective bargaining agreements, crank up assembly line production, and ignore grievances.
As one sympathetic headline read, workers forced to strike in defense of their living standards, slashed by soaring prices, taxes, and anti-union profiteers. Workers at Goodyear, Firestone, and Goodrich had petitioned the War Labor Board for an 8-cent raise and shift differentials that they were entitled to per the Little Steel formula. For a year, they waited patiently and were outraged when they learned the board had only granted a 3-cent raise. Firestone and Goodrich workers threw down their tools immediately and poured out of the factories. Goodyear workers soon followed. In a protest telegram to the board, United Rubber Workers leaders pointed out that living costs had increased by 23% since January 1941. They also noted that essential to maintaining the no-strike agreement was a just settlement of grievances and a $25,000 cap on executive salaries, neither of which had been adhered to. The walkout was one of the first major challenges to the no-strike pledge. Women took the lead as picket captains and dispatchers. Their leadership was accepted without question. Flying pickets cruised the city to enforce picket lines. Black workers at Firestone, impressed by the union's fight for equal rights, figured prominently in the strike. Workers returned to the job with their spirits high, having forced the board to reconsider their demands.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Remember, check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Also, become a WBAI buddy by going to WBAI.org and signing up for the buddy program. Say, hey, you know what? I like the Rick Smith Show. I want to make sure the station stays on the air. I want to make sure that we make WBAI strong for the future so that we can continue to have radio for the people. Go to WBAI.org and sign up today. If you've got a thought, I want to hear it, especially on this. This is an important issue. I mean, are we okay with the fact that, over the last couple of years, I mean, we're talking 4 years, 119 mass school shootings. This is now the new, when I was a kid, it was dive under the desks because the Russians could be bombing us into oblivion. Mutual assured destruction. That was the heart of the Cold War. That was our concern. The bombs could fly. And, realistically, the chances of that happening, we knew were very, very small. My kids, they understand the chances of some nut coming in and shooting up their school, one of their peers, not out of the realm of possibility. And especially, in an area where I live, where the gun culture is, people have access to them. Because, like I said, a number of times, I've been fairly fortunate that I grew up in an area where if you saw somebody with a gun, somebody was probably going to die. I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. Guns were used for murder. They were used for crime. I now live in a neighborhood where it's a different gun culture. There's a free gun range not far from my house. The culture is, hunting. It's now a tool for other things, sportsmen, hunting and target shooting and that kind of thing. So I kind of understand there's a difference. And I understand the mindset of law-abiding gun owner, family tradition stuff. I get that. And look, they are fun. It's fun to shoot things. It is. It's fun to target shoot. It's fun to especially some of the high-powered stuff, things that shoot a lot of things. Fun. But deadly. In the wrong hands, in the hands of somebody having, a day, deadly. And should your right to, hey, it's just my fun, should your right be able to infringe on mine or others? So Ted Cruz was being interviewed by the folks at Sky News. And this is where European journalists or journalists outside of the U.S. who ask actual questions are pretty to the point. And this Sky News reporter says, hey, a violent psychopath who's able to get a weapon so easily, an 18-year-old with two AR-15s. But why does this only happen in your country? He says, I really think that's what many people around the world cannot fathom. Why only in America? Why is this American exceptionalism so awful? And Ted Cruz almost is losing his mind. He tries to walk away, and he goes, how does he put it? He goes, you got your political agenda, God love you, and he tries to storm away, and he goes, no, Senator, wait, I want to understand why you don't think that it's a gun problem. Why you? And the same woman chimes in and says, hey, why is this just an American problem? And Cruz just stops and goes, why is it that people come from all over the world to America? It's because it's the most free, it's the freest, most prosperous, safest country on earth. Stop being a propagandist. And you go, wait a second, who's the propagandist here? Ted, we're not the freest, we're not the most prosperous, and we're certainly not the safest. This is the kind of jingoism that we allow our politicians to get away with. And he was able to storm off and have his little hissy fit. Now you go, but oh my God, Rick, you just said that we're not the freest, most prosperous, safest country on earth. How dare you? That's heresy. We're number one in all those things because we're number one in everything. Yeah, when it comes to dead children, we are number one. When it comes to guns, we're number one. When it comes to incarcerating our citizens, absolutely, we're number one. And if you've watched that, well, I think it was called Newsroom with Jeff Daniels a number of years back, where he does that clip that's all over the internet. While we're not the greatest country on earth, but we should be, he's not wrong. We're number one in a lot of the wrong categories. Number of people who believe in angels. I got a problem with that. But we're not the freest, most prosperous, safest country on earth, but we should be. And this is where policy then comes into all of this. This is where doing something. Now, do I put any solace or any hope in Joe Manchin saying it feels different right now and that he hopes that 70 or 80 senators will vote for some kind of gun reform? No, because he said probably the exact same thing back in 2018. It's like deja vu all over again. That's my problem. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Mayat on line one. Mayat, how are you today?
Is that me, Brother Rick?
That is you. How are you today? What's on your mind?
Very well, and kudos to Carol, who always gives us an upbeat, positive response. I have a couple thoughts, and it's somewhat in disagreeing with you, although
please do.
Yes. Okay. So this recent development, where they literally sought out the janitor to give them a master key to enter the classroom being shot up.
They breached the door. Yes.
Yeah. Now, there's something wrong with that picture because, and I also heard reports that the parents who wanted to take charge themselves at that point were tackled, were tasered. One woman was handcuffed. So my wonderment, Rick, is whether this relates to Stephen, and it's spelled Stephen Marche, Marche, his book as a journalist called The Next Civil War, Dispatches from America's Future. And when I heard an interview with him sometime, I guess last year, as the book came out, I think it was with Leonard Lopez at BAI, but I remember at the end of the interview, he was asked after, reporting all these experts and military who said there's a 67% chance of this Civil War happening. And he was asked, well, what would be a way to remediate this? And his response took your jaw to the floor. because he said unless, and these are from the experts, he said, unless you go to your police departments, there are 1,800 of them, and your military, and root out the white supremacists, that would be one of the most important things you can do. So my question is, or concern is these people knew exactly what they were supposed to do in an active shooter situation, and they had no plan. And at the same time, when it's a Breonna Taylor where they're at the wrong apartment, or the guy up in White Plains who had been part of the community as a correction officer, I'm blanking on his name, but when his Medi alert went down and didn't work, the police wanted to come in and shoot him, no questions asked, and that's what he did. And then this recent case in Minneapolis where they had the wrong party, someone visiting someone, sleeping on the couch, so they never asked questions before that dirty work. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is we need to pull back from this idea about a certain culture that exists in police and on the ground by Esther, I have her first name in hand, that I think it was yesterday. She brought on Waisley, who is a city councilman in Minneapolis, and the story she told after nothing, and Congress replicates that in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, where a public safety reconfiguration didn't go through, and she just continues to say devastating situation in terms of a culture of racism and devastation toward the black community. So I think we need to think a little bit deeper in terms of why they had a response and then turned on the parents who wanted to do their role. It's much deeper. And I will be following up with you with a email because I have a suggestion or two about an author you might bring on, but it's called The Next Civil War by Stephen Marsh, and it'll have your jaw to the floor. And thank you so much. I look forward to the other beloved callers. I enjoy so much. Thank you, Rick.
Thanks so much. No, one of the first questions that came up, is, how many, and to your point, is, anybody checking their social media for any replacement theory writings, any CRT writings, and this is now the culture that we're in. And to your point, I've had for a very long time, probably 10 years now, at least, questioning the training our police officers get. We've now trained our police to be military. We've armed them with military armaments. They now have tanks. I was pulled over a couple of years ago, and out for minor traffic. I forget what. I think it was an inspection. Was out of date, and 3 police officers that looked like they fell out of a war zone, surrounding my car, and you're going, this isn't normal. And part of this, I do believe, is couplefold. The prevalence of guns. These are people who want to protect themselves. They're trained that there are so many guns on the streets right now that at any minute, they're not going to go home. And look, I understand that to a degree. I understand that it's an incredibly dangerous job, and that at any minute their lives can be taken. So I completely understand. Cover your behind. Get that. But what you never see anymore? When I was a kid, when someone got arrested, you put your hands on the car, spread your legs, they put your hand behind your back, put the other hand behind your back, and then they help you into the squad car. You don't see that anymore. How do you see people get arrested? They slam them to the ground, they knee in the back, they completely subdued, because that's how they're trained. And I argue it's the training that we've done for our police officers to train them in this military mentality that we have. Now look, we're not supposed to have deployed military on our soil, But I would argue every community across this country's got a little military running around, enforcing traffic laws, which when you have that kind of mentality, it ramps up that kind of danger. And we're in interesting times. We most certainly are. But on the other side, I want to get your thoughts. Do you think any of this changes? Joe Manchin, like I said, he says right now, he's got hope. 70 or 80 senators are going to come along and vote for gun reform legislation because this time it's different. The 119th time, this time's different. For me, it seems like deja vu all over again, to quote Yogi Berra. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show.
United we bargain. Divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Can you imagine if the earth beneath your hometown caught fire and kept on burning for more than half a century? That is what happened in Centralia, Pennsylvania. And on this day in labor history, the year was 1962. Centralia was a mining town with 2,700 residents built above a rich vein of anthracite coal. It's not entirely certain what started the fire. The town had used an abandoned mine as a landfill. Each spring, they would burn the trash collected during the year. It's thought that the trash burning was not fully extinguished and spread to the mine. Once they realized the extent of the problem, town and state officials tried to stop the fire, but they could not. In 1979, the owner of a gas station in town checked his underground tanks. He found the gasoline had heated up to 172 degrees Fahrenheit. By the early 1980s, sinkholes began to open up around the town. One 12-year-old boy almost perished in one of the sinkholes. 7th grader Tom Dombowski was crossing his neighbor's yard when the earth beneath him opened up. He fell 8 feet. Todd was rescued by his cousin before he plummeted further into the 150-foot hole. In 1984, the government began relocating town members to other locations. 8 residents fought the relocation and won permission to stay on the burning landscape until they passed away. Today, Centralia burns underground and is but a pile of rubble and abandoned houses on the surface. The asphalt of the town's roads have deep gashes and white smoke rising from the cracks. It's estimated the former mining town may continue to burn for another 2 centuries.
Some refuse to leave a place they found.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Sweet home for walls of memories.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, as I said, I don't see much changing. I know Mitch McConnell has said that he's given permission to talk about getting something done, but, we've gone through this a number of times. I don't see anything. Maybe Joe Manchin's right. Maybe this time is different. Let's go to the phones. Got Al from New Jersey, a retired New York policeman. Al, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hi there, Rick. So I just want to make 2 points. One, as a retired NYPD, I responded to 9/11 and the whole thing like that, and
Yep.
and we exercised a brand of policing where we rushed into it and we tried to do the best we could under the circumstances. But what we're seeing in this Parkland, Florida shooting and this Texas incident is bald-faced cowardice. That's the only way I can describe it, and that's what you have there. People like me who are, in the profession or retired from the profession are ashamed and embarrassed on what we saw there. And, there's no excusing it. There's no use of language that can, pretty it up. The second point is that most cops that I know, anyway, and I know a lot of them, are Republicans, and we're not against reasonable restrictions on gun ownership. So I don't like when people try to frame this as a republic
I don't think I've done that, have I?
that all. No, not you, but in the general media, atmosphere that goes on, this is not true. Most cops I know are for reasonable restrictions on gun ownership, and that does not violate the Second Amendment.
Now, my gun friends say any it's a slippery slope, Al. The second you start talking about training, mandating any training or mandating any kind of background checks, because I had someone yesterday, say we've already got background checks and they don't work, and I go, yeah, because there's so many loopholes. You can drive a truck through them because, as another friend of mine does, he doesn't buy from gun stores. He buys from garage sales and from people on the internet, which you don't need to get checks for. So I'm glad to hear that because, I'm hoping there are 70 or 80 senators who are going to do something on a common sense level. Because look, these shootings, this is getting too frequent, and I think it's harming our country. It's harming us globally, but it's harming us, nationally as well, I think.
Yeah, well, this is an argument. The slippery slope thing. I think that people who state that really, I have to question what is their attraction to guns in the first place. I own 3 guns. I'm licensed to carry in 50 states. Do I walk out of my house every day with a gun strapped to me? I don't. If I'm going to ride the New York City subway that day, well, that's a different story. But, for me going down to the grocery store and stuff like that, I don't have a love affair with my firearms where, I constantly feel under threat. Here's the other side of the coin, though, and I don't hear this talked about. The same people who want, restrictions and this and that on guns and, mentally ill people should not be getting these guns. They're the same ones who, allow our city streets to be littered with thousands of homeless who are really mentally ill people. And once you try to take any action against mentally ill, they will run to court and try to sue to stop it. So they've got, if you're going to attack this problem, and a lot of these people are doing these shootings, let's face it, they have mental issues. Well, then you're going to have to crack down on mentally ill people in this country because they're running around, they're getting guns, but they're also all over our streets in the city. You can't have it both ways.
So, Al, what do you do with this? Because look, one of the frames that I'm getting from the right is, especially with this shooter in Texas, he comes from a broken home. He does, fatherless. The mother had problems, poverty, all this stuff. I don't see policy. I see lots of finger pointing. I see lots of blame. What's the policy going forward? Look, I'm a policy guy. What's the action we should be taking? So you're saying they're the homeless, and look, I don't want people being homeless. I want to help. What's the policy that you would pursue?
We have to go back to institutionalizing people. That's just a fact that people don't want to face up to it. It goes against their core beliefs, but we have to realize some people are irredeemable. Whether they're mentally ill or their criminality is such. We got people in New York City. This guy that shot up the subway. He's got an extensive criminal record, but they never put these people away. And it's the same people who will argue for giving those people bail. Okay, that will come down and say, well, we got to get rid of all guns. There's a conundrum. No. They need to face that also. They have a dichotomy that they need to resolve.
Now, let me ask you one last question. As a New York a retired police officer, my premise has been that we've changed police training over the years into a much more of a militaristic kind of fashion. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, and I saw it coming in at the end of my career. I didn't like it. Listen. Policing is an art. It's the same way as a doctor. It's the art of medicine. A lawyer. It's the art, practicing the law
Yeah.
in the well of the courtroom. Policing is the same way. There's nuance to it. But what we have now, like you said before, throwing people to the ground and all this other stuff, a knee on George Floyd's neck. I never understood that type of policing. If as cops, we would look out for each other. If one of us, listen, we could lose our temper, but another cop, my partner, would always step in and say, "Hey, Al, okay, back off." The whole thing. We'd look after each other. Not one of those cops in the George Floyd thing did that because they were afraid of that officer that had his knee on his neck. That's the type of policing. That's not the art of policing. The art of policing is discretion, knowing when to give somebody a break, knowing when somebody may have done something wrong in the moment, but yet it can be forgiven, and then a lesson is learned. We both go, home at the end of the day, and you're not like a robot. You get what I'm saying? We've lost that in policing nowadays.
Yeah. I know I said last thing, but the gun thing, I want to go back to this real quick. Because all of my police friends, they're not thrilled by the fact that we've got 400 million guns in this country. It is something that is on their mind every time they stop somebody. It's always been my belief that the more guns, the less safe police are. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Well, there's such a thing known as tactics. When you're engaging somebody, there's tactics that you can do that don't necessarily have to be threatening. Whenever I would talk to somebody, I carried my holster on my right hip. I would always put my left hip them, so that my gun couldn't be taken away from me. I walk down the streets of New York now, I see cops that are not practicing any tactics. I don't know if they're not being trained with it anymore. But it used to be the old-timer cops that would take a young cop under his wing. I did it for many years, and I teach them those things, and you could be effective as a cop. But now cops seem to be so black and white. They don't understand that, we all do things that may be a little bit out of order. It doesn't mean you're going to slap cuffs on people. And also, cops do a bad job explaining why they're taking actions against people. I would always say to people, listen, I'm going to arrest you, but if I put you in a position to be under arrest, that means you went so far over the line that I had no choice.
Yeah.
And I always would say to people, they say, why are you arresting me? I would say, we live in a world with rules.
Yeah, you did this,
and
not me.
They would have, yeah. And that was like a eureka moment. Nobody had ever told them in their life that they live in a world with rules. That was the first time, they would shake their head. They're like, oh, my God, it was like they're telling me something that's an epiphany. But, you have to explain that to people.
Yeah. No, good stuff. Al, I appreciate the call, man. Thank you.
Yeah, enjoy your show.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Please call again. No, that was actually, I was expecting something much different out of Al. I'm glad that went well. Let's go to Stephen on lawn. Stephen, how are we doing today?
Good. You've been going in and out. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah. What's going on? How are you today?
Oh, I am A-OK, peachy.
What's on your mind?
But the country's not. No doubt in my mind. Like you've been saying, we got these politicians and they have absolutely no moral compass. Nothing. The only thing they care about is staying in power. Once they get in, and what do? The only way you can stay in is by getting massive amounts of money. So they cater to the people that can give them and do give them the massive amount of power. And they sell their souls immediately to these people. So you got, it doesn't, the country's in a crap show. No question about it in my mind. And as far as these AR, the A in the AR doesn't stand for assault rifle. It stands for some brand, supposedly. We're supposed to think they're not an assault rifle. I mean, pretty ridiculous. I don't see, it's almost like George Collins said, you're sitting back just watching the things evolve. Just unbelievable, killing children. You know,
And then to say, and then to
unbelievable.
come out and say, well, it's the doors. Yeah, no, it's the guns. There's a common denominator in all these things, and it's this gun. It's these assault weapons. And when we had an assault weapons ban, these things went down. The second we got rid of it, they tripled. There seems to be a common
Look at what
denominator.
happened in Australia, in these foreign countries. Completely agree. When they restricted or bought back the guns and everything, you know, it's the availability. Yes, and I hear that from my brother, you know, about automobiles killing people. How many? Did they kill a whole classroom full with an automobile? You know, how much damage can you do with just about anything?
But here's the thing, Stephen. You know that I love the car argument. I love that argument because, well, you know, in order to have a car, you have to register it. You have to be proficient in it. You have to prove that you can drive it. You have to have it inspected. You have to have it insured. So if you want to go that argument, I would love to have that argument.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Meanwhile, he's a retired New York City police officer. But yeah, we're on different sides of the fence. You know, because for me, you know, take the guns away from people. You know, you got to, you know, it's like my argument with this stop and frisk. You know, if you know, what about my constitutional rights not to be shot? You know, I don't know. It's a gray area to me, but yeah, we're in a dark place, and it looks like it's getting darker. You know, with these people. You know, I have a brother-in-law. They have 2 ARs, which they've modified to make them fully automatic. A bunch of ghost guns, waiting for their pistol permit, and real mad because it's taken so long for the legal carry pistol permit. You know, this is just, and they're thinking like, yeah, the Civil War is coming, and they're ready.
Yeah, and one of the questions I asked
talking
those
about
folks,
shooting Democrats.
and that's it. That's where
Say
it comes. That's where it comes to. Everybody that I know who's one of these carry people, you know, who can't leave the house without their fetish. It's all about they're so fearful of everything, of the others, that it's frightening to me because, you know, we're now
More like anger to me.
Exactly.
Their anger at the other. So much anger that they're willing to, you know, it's not like the old days. You know, we're talking about where, you know, we can disagree. I can be on the opposite side of the fence, but you don't feel like you have to kill me because I disagree with you and think that people should get food to eat.
Yep.
You know?
No, I'm right there with
It's
you, Steve.
unreal. You know, we've gotten so incredibly polarized. It's so difficult. At this point, I have to keep my mouth shut. You know, I have a sister so convinced that the election was stolen. You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, what about all these lawsuits and these judges that were appointed by this guy? Oh, they were paid off. Where'd you get that? What crazy, you know, thing did you get that from? Another
VF channel.
family members. Another one that thinks, you know, another one that thinks that this virus comes from outer space. She sends me to some website called London Real. And I'm a scientist, so I'm trying to explain to her that, yeah, very small amounts, but it's not enough to affect you, these amounts that, you know, get through to the cell phone. It's just like, and these are, you know, blood relatives. So I'm like, wait a minute, you pretty much have to have the same type of brain that I have. How come we're on such opposite sides of the fence so much? It's just so crazy. And this is, you know, I know it. So many, and I'm not alone.
This is why you can't stop speaking. That's why now's the time to speak up and not be silent, Stephen. We need sane. We need rational.
I'm not. It's just like I don't take an adversarial position. But as I said, I pointed out, what about all these lawsuits? You know what I mean? But when they come at you with the unreality of, you know, these people are, you know, what about they get paid off? I'm like, well, where'd you get that?
Yeah.
You know, and they don't have an answer. They're not looking for an answer. They've gone down in the rabbit hole so deep. You know, a bunch of anti-vaxxers. Meanwhile, I've given many, many, many vaccines. You know, and I hear on this station we're on right now about how many deaths have been caused by the vaccine. You know, I would like to see the stats because I heard it was like 30,000 that the government said. This is on a 12 o'clock program on this station. And I'm like, that's not anything I've heard or
I've never
read.
heard that.
You know, so, yeah. And, and, you know, I know what I heard. and it wasn't long ago at all, like this past week. So, and meanwhile, I could agree with so much of what that gentleman says, and then all of a sudden they'll come out with something and I'll say, uh-oh, you know what I mean? Off the deep end. And, yeah, and of course members of my family, too. You know, here I'm giving vaccinations, and they're like, you're killing people. You're hurting people. I'm like, well, I'm going to get my second booster shot myself. You know what I mean? It's like, I must believe something, but...
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM.